Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all of you to this EIF debate on the Digital Markets Act. Where do we stand? Today's debate is hosted by our steering committee member, Andrus Ansip, MEP with the Renew Europe group, vice chair of the IMCO committee, member of the EIDA Special Committee of the European Parliament, and, as you may know, former European Commissioner for the Digital Single Market. Thank you very much for taking the lead on this important and timely debate at our forum. I will leave you the floor in a moment, but before I go there, I will introduce our panelists with whom we will talk about the DMA and its potential impact on the EU digital economy. Let's welcome all our speakers, starting with Gerard de Graaff, Director of Digital Transformation in Digiconnect at the European Commission, Carolina Lorenzon, board member of ACT, the Association of Commercial Televisions in Europe, Jason Oxman, CEO of ITI, Information Technology Industry Council, and we will be also joined by Andreas Schwab, MEP, EIF member, and rapporteur of the DMA proposal for the IMCO committee. Thank you all very much for joining us today. I expect this to be a very interesting discussion. But with no further ado, I leave the floor now to our hosting MEP for his opening remarks. We'll then listen to our guest speakers and a Q&A will follow later. So be ready with your questions.
Thank you, Maria. Dear participants, I'm happy to host this DMA event, and I'm also happy because of the fact that we have such high-level speakers. There are 10,000 different platforms in the European Union, and there is a platform to business regulation dealing with the relations of those platforms and businesses. Digital Markets Act has to deal with the relations between business users and really big platforms, so-called gatekeepers platforms. DMA was warmly welcomed by all political groups in the European Parliament. There is broad understanding that the DMA is needed and it's supported by all the groups. Anyway, more than 1,200 amendments were tabled, and now we're trying to find compromises between all those proposals. But of course, we are facing with some really hot debates about the details. I'm especially happy that our IMCO rapporteur, Andreas Schwab, will be together with us today and will take this difficult task to explain where we stand. Looking forward to have a fruitful debate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrus. Now I would like to welcome Gerard de Graaff with Digiconnect, European Commission. It's been 10 months after the initial proposal of the European Commission. Where do we stand, Gerard?
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Maria Rosa. It's also a pleasure to be on the same panel with my former boss, the Vice President, former Vice President Andrus Ansip, who's done a lot for the digital single market. Let me maybe first say how important technology platforms and positive technology platforms are for the European economy. I think we've all relied extensively on technology platforms during the COVID pandemic. We're using it to connect with friends and family. We're using it to work. We're using it to shop. We're using it to extract information. So I absolutely want to avoid giving the impression that somehow the European Commission or the European Union is anti-platforms. But we have also seen that platforms raise concerns in our society. They do so in terms of the content that they host or products that they offer. This is covered by the Digital Services Act, and they do so also, at least some of them do so, by benefiting from the economies of scale and scope and the network effects and becoming really, really large to the point where they become gatekeepers and can set the rules of the market. Here, I think what is important about the Digital Markets Act is that it is, and it sounds a little bit technical, it's an ex ante instrument. So the legislators are going to define what is acceptable behavior in the European Union, business behavior, and what is not. What are the do's and the don'ts? What are the unfair practices and what are obligations that should be imposed? on the gatekeepers to make sure that markets are fair. This is different from competition law. I think we have gained significant experience with competition law over the years, and it can be quite effective, but it also takes quite long, and it is case by case. So this is the real novelty of the Digital Markets Act. It applies from the beginning. These practices, these principles, these obligations are self-executing and will have to be complied with by the gatekeepers. If you want to do business in the European Union, those will be the rules. This should be positive for businesses, for SMEs who depend on the gatekeepers. It should also be positive for consumers who will see greater choice, will have greater abilities to switch, and will have also lower prices. The third point I wanted to make is about the international. The European Union is not the only region in the world that is looking at these issues. We are in very close contacts also with other regions in the world, for example, in the Trade and Technology Council with the US. We are discussing also with Japan, with a lot of other countries, Canada. And one thing is clear is that the problem analysis is shared. We do agree that there is a problem, that something needs to be done. Maybe we do not always agree about exactly what needs to be done, but definitely I think there is a great degree of consensus in the policymaker community and also in the academic community about the need for public policy intervention. Last point, where do we stand? Well, I'm sure that the rapporteur, Mr. Schwab, and I'd like to also to commend the rapporteur, Mr. Ansip, in the European Parliament for the very intensive efforts that they are undertaking to come to a position, a negotiating position. We see the same sense of urgency and the momentum in the Council. I would term the process so far as smooth. That's not to say that it will necessarily remain smooth or it will be easy. There are still some really complicated issues that need to be trashed out. But I think we can be quite confident that we are well on our way and that it is very probable that in the first half of next year, under the French presidency, there will be an agreement on the Digital Markets Act, which will then, of course, need to be implemented. So it's realistic to expect that the Digital Market Act will enter into force in the European Union as of 2023.
Thank you very much, Gerard, for this overview. We look forward to the first half of next year, of course. Now, I would like to welcome again Carolina Lorenzon from the Association of Commercial Televisions in Europe and leave her the floor for her views.
Thank you, Maria Rosa. Thank you to the European Internet Foundation and to our host, Mr. Ansip. And thank you for this opportunity to voice our hope and some concerns over this very ambitious proposal. I actually must clarify that I'm speaking also with the support of friends and colleagues in the media sector, which have coalesced in support of a common perspective. As representatives of media's Europe's media, comprising both commercial and public broadcaster, we have welcomed the European Commission proposal, which has the potential to become actually a landmark ex-ante attempt to prevent potential abuses of dominant positions. Actually, over time, we've come to realize that the magic aura surrounding technological innovation, which we do welcome, as Gerard de Graaff just explained us, but it was also a means to cover up pretty basic unfair commercial practices with an opaque patina. Today, I shall focus on 4 aspects that are fundamental to TV and radio broadcasting, and namely scope, unfair tying and bundling practices, self-preferencing, and audience measurement. I'll try and be quick. And on scope, we need to ensure that all relevant services are covered, and thereby the list of core platform services should be adapted to encompass web browsers. In its Android decision, the European Commission distinguished between web browsers and operating system. There is an apparent need to cover web browsers such as Google's Chrome, which has a market share of over 60% in Europe and is a service which is pivotal to Google's ecosystem. We welcome, in fact, that this clarification is supported by Mr. Schwab and increasingly by the whole negotiating team in Parliament. Furthermore, a new regulatory framework that will mitigate the commercial imbalances and competition concerns that arise from the gatekeeping position of voice assistant platforms is urgently needed. The adoption of ambitious provisions will create opportunities for increased digital audio listening and prevent voice assistants from disintermediating radios from their audiences. This view is shared across the wider audio industry, including a newly formed CEO coalition from Europe's leading commercial radio broadcaster, representing almost 1,000 radio stations across 16 countries, with a combined weekly audience of 218 million listeners, including Mediaset Radio, and the umbrella Digital Radio Alliance, EDRA, and umbrella organizations for commercial and public service radio broadcasters. Ensuring that DVAs, including in-car infotainment systems, are comprised in the list of core platform services also reflects the initial findings of the competition competition sector inquiry into the IoT, the Internet of Things, which confirmed that DVA's central role in the interconnection of smart devices and services, giving the providers opportunities to engage in anti-competitive practices. What we see is actually that consumers are nudged into welcoming services that at first seem to provide more choice, but in the end will end up locking in consumers and locking out competition, thereby curtailing competition. And for media companies like ours, actually, this would be detrimental to pluralism. On unfair unbundling and tying of services, to ensure that unfair practices are effective preventive, bundling and tying proposed obligations should be widened. In Article 5.1e, it should not only prevent the gatekeeper from imposing its own proprietary identification systems, but also any ancillary service it may feature. For instance, a marketplace which provides AV content for free as a complementary loyalty tool to its users, it should be prevented from tying it with the sale of advertising. And we see that this is happening in the market already. Concerning Article 5.1f, a bundling provision only focusing on subscription and registration is too limited. It should be widened to cover other types of bundling. For instance, users shouldn't be required to have a mandatory premium subscription to a given online marketplace in order to be able to watch their favorite football match or entertainment show on the marketplace ancillary service. On self-preferency, the media sector supports an extension of the definition of ranking to cover all core platform services that can favor their own products, services, for example, video sharing platforms, app stores, and voice assistants. The obligation in Article 6.1d should therefore be extended to also address practices such as a gatekeeper redirecting a user searching for a podcast via its digital video assistant to its proprietary podcast services, or as recently ascertained by the Australia Competition and Consumer Commission, Google preventing rival ad tech services from accessing ads on YouTube, providing its own ad tech services instead, and thus obtaining a strong competitive advantage. One last thing on self-preferencing, widening the self-preferencing provisions to also cover conditions of use of the service functionalities and interfaces would ensure a technology-neutral approach. This would also allow unfair display practices to be caught, thus covering broadcasters' content up displaying on connected TVs. On audience measurement, I promise this is the last one, we welcome the provision on audience measurement in Article 6.1g, but in order to ensure meaningful access to information for the media sector, we would insist on the need for granular, reliable, and transparent information, independently verified by trusted and neutral third parties. We really are most grateful for this timely debate and thank the negotiating team in Parliament for the work they're carrying out, and are ready to provide any additional insights on existing market practices to ensure that the final outcome of this proposal will effectively address ongoing imbalances. Ambitious ex-ante obligations in the DMA can ensure fair access conditions to online audiences on any connected device, and ultimately supporting the long-term sustainability of independent European media. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carolina, for sharing the views of the media sector. And I'd like now to give the floor to MEP Andreas Schwab, who has joined us in the meantime. A warm welcome, Mr. Schwab. Thank you for being here with us. We are eager, of course, to hear from you on the DMA. Where do we stand? The floor is yours.
Good morning, Maria Rosa. Good morning, colleagues. It's my pleasure to report to you this morning about where we stand on the DMA. And I'm also very glad if you can also share some concerns at a later stage. First of all, I would like to tell you that in the European Parliament, when we were discussing and starting to prepare amendments and content-related elements on the DMA, there is a very clear commitment to make this law a tool not to stop innovation, but to allow further innovation. It's a tool not to finish with competition, but to increase competition, and to do that on the basis of the rule of law, therefore all the time proportionate, all the time clear enough to be applied as the law in the end, and all the time fair. Fairness in the direction of the SMEs and smaller companies and newcomers and market entrants, and fair at the same time as well to big companies that have already acquired quite a lot of market power. And having said that, the discussions in committee that have unfortunately been a bit more online than in person, and therefore have not taken place as often as it would have been the case normally, were always, let's say, clear in that direction, but there are nonetheless some key concerns where political groups are not agreeing to each other. The first element of concern is, after all groups have accepted that this is a digital single market legislation and it's something else than merger policy, something else than competition policy, it's an internal market regulation, how to enforce this law. Because we see, for example, for product safety, for other elements, for customs, for example, in the area of the single market, we have a European authority, a European regulatory unit, and we have national regulatory units. And in all these areas, product safety, customs, they work together based on the same rules. In the area of the DMA, we don't have that yet, and therefore we are struggling how to make it as efficient as possible as a system, and as integrative also for national authorities to join. And therefore, I think on the governance proposals, we are now united. We are saying that the designation process of a gatekeeper has to be, by the very nature of the gatekeepers, a European decision. Let's say there is no Luxembourgish gatekeeper, only a European under the DMA, and therefore this process will remain with the European Commission. However, the Articles 5 and 6 to be monitored should also be a task for national authorities, and therefore we are eager to give them a right to request, so that they can monitor the application of Articles 5 and 6 and can inform the European Commission in the context of the high-level expert group about what they have found out. Secondly, the element of what role the European Commission should have in that process is clear. It should be a regulator that is speaking to the gatekeepers from face to face at the same level. And therefore, the European Commission has to have the power to be flexible, also with delegated acts to make the regulatory process, regulatory dialogue, how it's called in Article 7, a success. And also to give gatekeepers a chance to go through this fastly. That they know that if the Commission says that this is unlawful, that the Commission can adapt the relevant element in Article 5 and 6, and that they don't have only to rely on Article 6a that should allow the Commission to avoid circumvention issues. And therefore, in IMCO, and I think it's a view that is shared more or less in the Parliament now, some sort of delegated acts is needed, and the European Commission has been the main force to stand up to decide. The third element is the rules in Articles 5 and 6. These rules have been changed by my report, and so far there is a strong acceptance of most of the changes. However, there is still the wish to integrate further elements, and there are two concerns that have been discussed strongly. This is interoperability, that we should force the gatekeepers that they open their services with APIs to all other competitors. I have a bit of a doubt about that, because interoperability as a concept means that there is the same service available elsewhere, and therefore standards would be the right approach to go for, and standards need to be developed by the European Commission. And for example, on messaging services on social media, there might be calls now for the European Commission to start such a process, but that should then also be done together with all companies that are having concerns there. Article 5 and 6, there is another element which is targeted advertising. The Social Democrats and the Greens want to ban this. The EPP and others are saying that's too much. We need more transparency in the advertising sector in general, much more transparency for business clients, most of all. And with the Democracy Action Plan of the European Commission, there might also be something to cope with the Cambridge Analytica scandal and other stuff, especially in relation to the gatekeepers. But banning targeted advertising for us would be too much. For political advertising, there are specific rules to be applied, yes, and we should not allow this to be circumvented. But targeted advertising is something where the consumer should have the chance, the user, to opt out if he doesn't like it, but that can also be useful. The next element that I would like to speak quickly about, Maria Rosa, and I hope that you give me 2 more minutes, is that the number of core platform services that should be covered by that closed list in Article 2 is still a point that is under discussion. In a move to allow for a broader compromise, I have been committing myself last time in a shadows meeting to enlarge this list, also to online media services, for example, to be included. But it's also clear, and I have made that also clear in the last shadows meetings, that we cannot make a Christmas tree out of Article 2 now. But if we have to add 3 or maybe 4 core platform services, even if the European Commission is not convinced that there is a problem, we could do so. And then the final point is the big question all the time: what is the scope? You know that I have been proposing 100 billion because I believe that we have to make such a number clear. We have to start up with a common sense approach. The number of 65 is in our daily life only a number that you refer to when you go to pension. Even that is changing. It's going to 67 in most member states. And therefore, I think 100 would be the right place. But not because I'm thinking about GAFAM. I don't think about that, because the numbers of these companies will grow in the next month so quickly that this is very quickly outdated. And therefore, to future-proof that proposal, I think there is definitely a need to make the numbers higher. Now, I see that there in the Parliament is some concern. Some concern is also channeled by people that are listening to this morning's meeting. So we have been seeing that the ECR group has made a proposal of 80 billion. The European Commission has made a recalculation on the basis of the methodology that they came with forward in December last year with the 65 billion. And the Commission is saying that nowadays it would be rather 79 billion because, as I said, the stock markets are growing. And therefore, the compromise looks like 80 billion for the time being. And we have to remind ourselves, and that's my final comment, what we are doing with the DMA to fix a specific problem that could not be fixed in the last 10, 15 years with other European legislation that is already there. We have platform to business regulation that we did in 2018. We have competition policy, we have merger policy, we have a lot of tools, not only at European, but also at national level. So we should not now make the big law for fairness all over the world and end up with something that is covering everything but achieving anything. We should focus ourselves, and then still we can review this in 5 or 10 years to make it better. We have to make sure that we can interact with the Americans that are at the moment thinking about similar elements. And I think we should try to make this a law which is fair to everyone and creates further innovation and competition. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to be with us this morning, and also for all the clarifications you have shared, and also for sharing some of the challenges that this legislation is facing now at the European Parliament. We look forward to seeing the next developments, of course. Now, I'd like to invite Jason Oxman, who will bring in the perspective of the tech sector. Jason is with the ITI Council.
Thank you, Maria Rosa, and good morning, everyone. It's such an honor to be here in Brussels. It's a shame that we're all here in Brussels in different office locations in the same city. I look forward to being all together in person sometime very soon. It's such an honor to be here on behalf of the technology industry with such thoughtful leaders as MEP Schwab and MEP Ansip, and we are grateful for the opportunity to participate in this event today and share our perspective on these very important issues. As MEP Schwab so eloquently captured, this proceeding is about promoting innovation and promoting competition, and that is the perspective of the tech sector as well. ITI, as a global tech industry organization, is proud to represent the world's most innovative companies. And the technology sector, of course, is the reason that we're all here able to do this event virtually today. As MEP Ansip mentioned, there are more than 10,000 platforms operating in Europe, including this platform, Hop-In, that I've never been on before, but is just absolutely marvelous and allows us to have this discussion. We know that so many people across Europe are working from home, children are learning from home during the pandemic, and technology makes that possible. And we want to make sure that all Europeans have access to the most innovative services that allow us during the COVID response to adapt to and eventually recover from this terrible pandemic. The technology sector, of course, includes companies that provide a range of products and services to consumers and businesses across the continent. ITI is proud to represent great software companies like SAP and transportation technology companies like Siemens, network hardware operators like Ericsson, financial service networks like Swift, energy efficient manufacturers like Schneider Electric, a great range of companies across various segments. And we're all paying very close attention to the DMA. And of course, because our membership includes companies across the technology sector, this is an enormously important proceeding for us. Our very diverse membership includes companies that would be labeled as gatekeepers by the DMA, and includes companies that recognize the equities at stake here because they are outside of that gateway definition. Our engagement in this debate is very focused on preserving key procedural and substantive protections for all parties involved in such important regulatory discussions, and also ensuring both transparent and non-discriminatory treatment of technology companies globally. Now, as a sector, the technology industry supports free and undistorted competition as key to promoting innovation and consumer welfare. The business community is committed to addressing all of the challenges raised in this proceeding, from digitization, both here in the EU and globally. And having closely followed the Trade and Technology Council, as Gerard mentioned earlier, we know that this matter, the DMA is under discussion between the EU and the US. We also know that US officials have raised some concerns about the potential discriminatory treatment of US headquartered companies, most recently at the first TTC meeting held in Pittsburgh on September 29th and 30th. Now, whenever necessary, it is important, as we've shared in our input to the DMA, it's important to consider that whatever instruments are adopted are proportionate and that they ensure contestable markets. We endorse the goal of the DMA to streamline rules and proceedings to address all of these emerging challenges that we're discussing today. We believe this can be achieved while retaining both the accuracy and the balance of rules. This is particularly relevant when we're talking about a framework that's entirely based on presumptions about future behavior. Now, we understand the goal of moving away from the current competition enforcement that is perceived as very long and very complex, as Mep Schwab talked about. And the DMA is proposing a number of approximations and presumptions to achieve easier enforcement. And I understand this approach, but I do want to caution that we don't want to oversimplify or overlook important nuances that require a closer look in certain circumstances. And I look forward to further discussion of that over the course of this event today. Now, there's a lot of discussion about the scope of the DMA, obviously, and in order to ensure that this new framework is well functioning and effective, it's essential that it's limited in scope to the core platform services that are genuinely acting as gateways. In other words, we need to focus on the type of service, not necessarily the type of company or the size of company or the market capitalization of company. It's really those services and those behaviors that we need to focus on. As regards the obligations, it's really important, and this is of course a key challenge, that we focus on the application to the specific service concerned. ITI has argued that the regulatory dialogue is enormously important and serves this purpose well. The regulatory dialogue would provide the Commission and all businesses concerned the opportunity to discuss how the best substantive obligations, if you will, can be applied in the context of a certain service. And then finally, as to the DMA's enforcement, it's key that whatever approach is chosen, it doesn't lead to fragmentation. We've been very supportive of the initial model based on centralized enforcement by the Commission. And we see valid reasons for concern about the role of national competition authorities to be involved in the process. But given the nature of the systems and the situations covered by the DMA, we do believe that the final decision should always rest with the European Commission to guarantee consistency across the European single market. We were enormously pleased to have the opportunity to participate in this discussion today. The thoughtful leadership of Mep Schwab and others has led to a very important discussion and a very important dialogue. And the goal, the twin goals of promoting innovation and promoting competition, ITI supports them both and looks forward to further dialogue both today and in the future as we work to have a DMA that works for all Europeans. Thank you.